All right, let's just jump right in. We're going to pull back the curtain on something that's, well, all around us, but almost completely invisible. I'm talking about the incredible system that keeps our cities from drowning in, well, trash.
I mean, think about it. You throw something in the bin, you haul that bin out to the curb, and then, poof, it just disappears, right? Gone. But here's the thing. That's not the end of the story at all. Nope, it's actually just the very beginning.
And that journey, it is an absolute marvel of civil engineering. Seriously, we're talking about a system built to handle millions of pounds of stuff every single day, and it does it with a kind of precision you would probably never guess.
So, to really get our heads around this, we're going to follow this 6-step roadmap together. This is basically the life cycle of our trash, from the moment we create it all the way to its final resting place. This is the exact framework engineers use, and it's going to be our guide through all the big important stages.
Okay, so first things first. Before you can even think about managing all this waste, you've got to measure it. I mean, it makes sense, right? You can't possibly design a system if you have no idea how big the problem actually is.
And right away, this brings us to a really interesting engineering problem. You'd think trash is all about volume, right? Like how much space it takes up in a landfill. And yeah, that's super important in the end, but when you're planning the system, the number one metric is actually weight. Why? Well, think about it. A pound is always a pound, but a cubic yard of trash can be all fluffed up or crushed down into a little cube. So for consistency, for accuracy, weight is king. All right, let's make this real. I want you to pretend you're an engineer for a day. Here's your data, fresh from the local landfill. You've got your regular compactor trucks, some pickup trucks full of leaves, a bunch of private cars, and then 2 massive trucks just loaded with broken concrete. Your mission is to figure out how many homes does all this trash actually come from.
Okay, so you pull out your calculator, you crunch the numbers, you figure out the total weight of everything that came in. It's a whopping 331,270 pounds. You divide that by the average amount of waste a home produces, and you get your answer, 32,118 homes. Simple enough, right? Case closed.
But not so fast. A good engineer doesn't just trust the first answer. They look at it and ask, wait a second, does this number actually make sense? There is something in that data, one little detail, that is throwing this whole calculation way off. Look at that table again. Can you see what it is?
Did you spot it? It's that broken concrete. That's not your everyday household trash. That's demolition waste. And just look at its specific weight. It is unbelievably dense. Get this. Those 2 truckloads by themselves make up more than 2/3 of the entire weight for the whole day. Wow.
So, let's do what a real engineer would do. We take that demolition waste out of the equation, we run the numbers again, but just for the regular household and yard waste. And the new answer, the number of homes we're actually serving? 9,475. I mean, that is a huge difference.
And that's really the big takeaway here. Getting the data right isn't just a small detail, it's everything. Think about it. Planning a system for over 32,000 homes versus one for under 10,000, those are 2 completely different universes. Being accurate at the very beginning saves you from making enormous, and I mean enormously expensive mistakes later on. All right, so that brings us perfectly to the next step in our journey, collection. Now that we have a good handle on how much trash we're dealing with, we've got to figure out the smartest, most efficient way to actually go out and pick it all up. And really, when you boil it down, there are 2 main ways this happens. First, you've got what's called the hauled container system. That's where a truck literally grabs the entire container and hauls it away. Like one of those giant dumpsters at a construction site. The second way is the stationary container system, and this is what most of us see every week. The truck pulls up to your bin, empties it right there on the spot, and leaves the container behind. Now, planning the routes for these trucks, that's where things get really cool. It's like a giant real-world puzzle. Engineers use these clever rules of thumb, they call them heuristics, to make the routes as efficient as humanly possible. I'm talking about things you'd never even think of. Like, always start your route at the top of a hill and work your way down. Why? Because the truck gets heavier and heavier, and going downhill saves a ton of fuel. It's all these little tricks that add up to save huge amounts of time, fuel, and of course, money. Okay, so the trucks have collected all the trash. But what happens if the landfill is like way outside the city? You can't have thousands of those smaller collection trucks clogging up the highway for a 100-mile trip. That would be a total logistical nightmare. So, engineers came up with a solution, and it's really the unsung hero of the whole system. It's called a transfer station, and it's such a simple but brilliant idea. It's basically a midway point. All those smaller neighborhood trucks finish their routes, and instead of driving for hours, they just dump their loads here. Then, all that trash gets compacted and loaded into massive, long-haul tractor trailers for that final, long leg of the journey.
And the impact of this one simple step is just huge. I mean, it is a total game changer. You're taking thousands of individual truck trips off the highway. That means less traffic, way fewer emissions, and massive savings on fuel. Plus, it means you don't have a giant traffic jam of garbage trucks waiting to get into the landfill. It just makes the whole system run so much smoother. It's an absolutely critical piece of the puzzle.
But wait, not everything is just headed straight for the landfill. Our next big step is all about recovery. It's basically like a modern-day treasure hunt, finding the valuable stuff that's hidden in all that trash.
And this is where something called a material recovery facility, or MRF for short, comes into play. You can think of it as the high-tech heart of the entire recycling operation.
You know that blue bin you put out with all the paper, plastic, and cans all jumbled together?
Well, this is where it all goes to get sorted out.
And inside one of these places, it's just this incredible dance of machines and people. You've got conveyor belts whizzing by, giant magnets pulling out steel cans, high-tech optical scanners that can spot different kinds of plastic, and yeah, actual people doing the final quality check. The whole point is to separate everything into clean, pure piles that are good enough to be sold and turned back into brand new products.
Okay, let's just pause for a second and look back at the whole journey we've just followed. It's this enormous, complex system that's always moving, always working, mostly completely out of sight. So we started with just generating the trash, and we saw how critical it is to measure it right. Then we moved on to collection, with all the smart logistics of just getting it off our curbs. We saw how transfer stations make the whole system way more efficient, and how processing facilities pull out the valuable stuff. All of these steps are these incredibly complex links in a chain that eventually leads to the final stop, disposal. And trust me, that's a whole other amazing engineering story for another day.
So I guess the biggest thing to take away from all this is that there's nothing simple about throwing something away. In fact, there really is no away. There's just this incredibly complex, meticulously designed system, a hidden masterpiece of engineering, really, that takes everything we decide we're done with and manages it on a scale that is just mind-boggling.
And so that leaves us with just one final thought, one question for you. Now that you know about the incredible complexity, the energy, the sheer brain power and engineering that goes into dealing with every single thing you put in that bin, does it change how you think about what you decide to throw away in the first place?